Sarah Martinez pushed her cart down aisle 7, carefully arranging boxes of cereal on the shelves. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she worked the late evening shift at Quick Mart, a small grocery store on the outskirts of Denver. Most customers had gone home for dinner, leaving the store quiet except for the soft music playing through the speakers. At 32, Sarah looked like any other part-time employee. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore the standard blue vest with the store logo. What customers didn't know was that just 18 months ago, she had been Lieutenant Commander Sarah Martinez, one of the most decorated female Navy SEALs in U.S. history. Sarah had spent 12 years serving her country, completing missions in some of the world's most dangerous places. She had led rescue operations, neutralized terrorist threats, and saved countless lives. But a roadside bomb in Afghanistan had changed everything. The explosion had killed 2 of her team members and left Sarah with a damaged leg and invisible wounds that ran much deeper. The doctors said she was lucky to walk again. The military offered her a desk job, but Sarah couldn't bear the thought of being stuck behind paperwork when her team was still out there fighting. So she had made the hardest decision of her life and left the service that had been her whole world. Now she was trying to build a new life as a civilian. The transition wasn't easy. Some days, stocking shelves felt meaningless compared to the life-or-death missions she used to lead. But her therapist had told her that normal activities could help her heal, and Sarah was determined to find her place in the regular world. The store manager, Mike Henderson, had been kind enough to hire her despite her limited retail experience. He was a good man in his 50s who treated his employees fairly and always made sure they felt safe during their shifts. Sarah appreciated that he never asked too many questions about her past or why someone with her obvious intelligence was working a minimum wage job. As Sarah continued her work, she noticed a white van pull into the parking lot through the store's large windows. 3 men got out, and something about their movements made her instincts kick in. They walked with purpose, scanning the area like they were planning something. One of them kept looking at his watch while another adjusted something under his jacket. Sarah's training had taught her to notice details that others might miss. The way the men moved, the nervous energy between them, and the fact that they had parked far from the store entrance all raised red flags in her mind. She had seen this kind of behavior before in hostile environments overseas. The men entered the store splitting up immediately. One went toward the back, another headed to the pharmacy section, and the third stayed near the front entrance. Sarah pretended to focus on her shelving work while keeping track of all 3 through her peripheral vision. Mike was at the customer service counter, helping an elderly woman with a return. 2 other customers browsed the produce section, unaware of any potential danger. Sarah's heart rate increased slightly, but her breathing remained steady. Years of training had taught her to stay calm under pressure. The man near the pharmacy section kept checking his phone and looking toward the front of the store. The one in the back aisle was positioning himself where he could see the employee break room and storage areas. Meanwhile, the third man by the entrance seemed to be watching for anyone else coming into the store. Sarah realized these weren't ordinary customers. Their coordinated movements and strategic positioning suggested they were planning something serious. She thought about alerting Mike, but she didn't want to cause a false alarm if she was wrong. Instead, she decided to move closer to get a better assessment of the situation. As she wheeled her cart toward the pharmacy area, Sarah got a clearer look at the man there. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with tattoos covering his arms and a nervous twitch in his jaw. When he turned slightly, she caught a glimpse of what looked like a weapon concealed under his loose shirt. Sarah's military experience kicked into high gear. She had been in situations like this before, though never as a civilian. Her mind began automatically calculating distances, exits, and potential threats. The store had 3 exits: the main entrance, an emergency exit in the back, and a staff entrance that led to the loading dock. The elderly customer finished her transaction and headed toward the door, chatting pleasantly with Mike about her grandchildren. Sarah realized that once the woman left, there would only be 4 people in the store besides the 3 suspicious men: herself, Mike, and the 2 customers in produce. She needed to make a decision quickly. Her instincts were screaming that something bad was about to happen, but she was no longer a Navy SEAL with backup and military authority. She was just a grocery store employee who was supposed to mind her own business and stay safe. But as Sarah watched the 3 men continue their suspicious behavior, she knew she couldn't just stand by and hope for the best. Too many innocent people could get hurt. Her training and her conscience wouldn't let her walk away from a potential threat, even if it meant putting herself at risk. The man by the entrance suddenly reached into his jacket, and Sarah saw him pull out what was unmistakably a handgun. At the same moment, the other two men moved into position, blocking the main routes through the store. The elderly woman had just stepped outside, leaving only the store employees and the couple in produce. Sarah's mind raced through her options. She was outnumbered and outgunned, but she had advantages the criminals didn't know about. They thought she was just another minimum wage worker who would cower in fear. They had no idea they were about to face someone who had been trained to handle exactly this type of situation. The next few moments would determine whether everyone in the store made it home safely that night. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to do what she had been trained to do. Even though she was no longer wearing a military uniform, some things never changed, and protecting innocent people was still her calling, whether she was serving overseas or stocking shelves in Denver. The gunman by the entrance shouted for everyone to get down on the ground. His voice cracked with nervousness, but the weapon in his hand made his intentions clear. Mike immediately raised his hands, his face going pale as he realized what was happening. The couple in the produce section dropped behind a display of apples, the woman letting out a small scream. Sarah's military training took over completely. While everyone else was focused on the man with the gun, she was already analyzing the entire situation. The three men were clearly amateurs. They were nervous, talking too loudly, and hadn't properly secured the store before making their move. A professional team would have disabled the security cameras and blocked all exits first. The leader, the one with the gun at the front, was shouting demands about opening the safe and gathering all the cash from the registers. His two partners were trying to control the customers, but they were making basic mistakes. They were standing too close together, leaving Sarah multiple angles of approach. Sarah slowly crouched down as instructed, but she positioned herself behind an end cap display where she could move quickly if needed. She kept her head down to appear compliant while her eyes tracked every movement the criminals made. Years of combat experience had taught her that the first few minutes of any confrontation were crucial. The second gunman moved toward Mike, demanding that he open the safe in the back office. Mike's hands were shaking as he tried to explain that he didn't have access to the main safe. Only the store manager had that combination. The criminal didn't believe him and grabbed Mike roughly by the arm. Meanwhile, the third man was trying to keep watch over the couple in produce and Sarah. He kept waving his gun around nervously, which told Sarah he probably wasn't experienced with weapons. His finger was on the trigger instead of alongside it, and he was holding the pistol with poor form that would make accurate shooting difficult. Sarah noticed that the security cameras were still recording everything. These criminals hadn't planned their robbery very well, which could work in her favor. She also saw that the silent alarm button behind the customer service counter was within reach if she could create enough distraction to get there. The leader was becoming more agitated by the minute. He kept checking his watch and cursing at his partners to move faster. Sarah recognized the signs of someone who was in over his head and getting desperate. Desperate criminals made dangerous decisions, and she needed to act before the situation escalated beyond control. When the man guarding her turned to help search for more cash, Sarah saw her opportunity. She had memorized the layout of the store during her weeks of work, including every blind spot and hiding place. Moving with the silent precision that had made her successful in special operations, she slipped away from her position and began working her way toward the customer service counter. Sarah's plan was simple but risky. If she could reach the silent alarm, police would be on their way within minutes. Then she needed to find a way to protect the innocent people in the store until help arrived. The criminals had shown they were willing to use violence, and she couldn't let anyone get hurt on her watch. As she moved through the aisles, Sarah's mind was completely focused. The doubts and struggles of civilian life faded away, replaced by the clear purpose she had felt during military operations. This was what she was trained for, what she was good at. For the first time since leaving the service, she felt truly in her element. The man searching the back office was growing frustrated with Mike's repeated claims that he couldn't access the main safe. Sarah could hear the criminal's voice getting louder and more threatening. She knew that desperate people often resorted to violence when their plans didn't work, and she needed to move fast. She reached the customer service area and carefully pressed the silent alarm button while staying hidden behind the counter. The button was designed to alert police without making any sound that would warn criminals. Within seconds, the signal would be transmitted to the local police station, and officers would be dispatched to the store. But Sarah knew that police response time in this part of town was usually 8 to 10 minutes. A lot could happen in that time, especially with 3 armed criminals who were already showing signs of panic. She needed to buy time and keep everyone safe until backup arrived. The leader suddenly noticed that one of his hostages was missing. He began shouting angrily, demanding to know where the female employee had gone. His partners started searching the aisles, their movements becoming more frantic and dangerous. Sarah had positioned herself where she could see all 3 criminals while remaining hidden. She watched as they split up to search for her, which actually worked in her favor. Divided, they were much less effective and more vulnerable to counterattack. The criminal who had been guarding the produce section found the couple huddled behind the apple display. He was young and clearly scared, waving his gun around wildly as he ordered them to stand up. The woman was crying, and her husband was trying to shield her with his body. Sarah realized that these civilians were in immediate danger. The nervous criminal might accidentally discharge his weapon, or he might hurt them intentionally if he felt threatened. She couldn't wait for police to arrive. She had to act now to protect innocent lives. Drawing on her special operations training, Sarah began to formulate a plan of attack. She would need to neutralize all 3 criminals quickly and efficiently, using the element of surprise and her superior training. The key was to strike fast and hard, taking out the biggest threats first while minimizing risk to the hostages. The store's layout would work in her favor. The aisles created natural corridors that would limit the criminals' movement and sight lines. She could use the shelving units for cover and concealment, approaching each target from their blind spots. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to put her plan into action. She was no longer just a grocery store employee trying to live a quiet civilian life. She was a Navy SEAL again, and she had a mission to complete. The lives of innocent people depended on her training, her courage, and her ability to do what others couldn't. Sarah moved through the store like a ghost, using every piece of cover available. Her military training had taught her how to move silently, even in civilian clothes and work boots. She stayed low, using the shopping carts and product displays to mask her movements as she closed in on her first target. The youngest criminal was still terrorizing the couple in the produce section. He was the most nervous of the 3, which made him both the most dangerous and the most vulnerable. Sarah could see sweat beading on his forehead as he waved his gun around, clearly out of his depth. Sarah approached from behind, using the large refrigerated produce cases to block his view. She had learned in the military that fear could make people do unpredictable things, so she needed to neutralize this threat quickly and quietly. The last thing she wanted was for him to panic and hurt the innocent couple. When she was within striking distance, Sarah moved with lightning speed. Years of hand-to-hand combat training took over as she grabbed the criminal's gun hand and twisted it away from the hostages. Before he could react, she struck a pressure point on his neck that immediately rendered him unconscious. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 seconds. The gun clattered to the floor, and Sarah quickly secured it while checking on the couple. They stared at her in shock, unable to process what they had just witnessed. The quiet grocery store employee had just taken down an armed criminal like a trained professional. Sarah put her finger to her lips, signaling for them to stay quiet. She whispered for them to hide in the storage room behind the meat counter and not come out until police arrived. The couple nodded frantically and followed her instructions, grateful to be away from immediate danger. Now there were 2 criminals left, and Sarah could hear them calling for their missing partner. The leader was getting more agitated, his voice echoing through the store as he demanded answers. Sarah knew she had maybe a minute before they discovered their unconscious friend and realized they were dealing with someone far more dangerous than a regular employee. She moved toward the back of the store where the second criminal was still trying to force Mike to open the safe. This man was larger and appeared more experienced than the first one. He held his weapon properly and seemed more comfortable with violence. Sarah would need to be extra careful with this target. Mike was pleading with the criminal, explaining again that he didn't have access to the main safe. The robber was growing frustrated and had started threatening physical violence if Mike didn't cooperate. Sarah could see that the situation was about to escalate dangerously. She positioned herself in the next aisle, separated from the criminal by a tall shelving unit filled with canned goods. Sarah began quietly removing cans from the middle shelf, creating a gap she could see through. She needed to time her attack perfectly to avoid any risk to Mike. The criminal raised his gun toward Mike's head, clearly preparing to follow through on his threats. Sarah knew she was out of time. She pushed hard against the shelving unit, causing it to tip toward the criminal. Cans and boxes crashed down on him as he tried to dodge the falling merchandise. In the confusion, Sarah vaulted over the shelving unit and landed behind the disoriented criminal. She used a chokehold technique that cut off blood flow to his brain, rendering him unconscious within seconds. Like his partner, he dropped to the ground without being able to raise an alarm. Mike stared at Sarah in complete amazement. The woman he had hired to stock shelves had just taken down two armed criminals with moves that looked like something from an action movie. His mouth opened and closed several times as he tried to find words. Sarah quickly picked up the second criminal's weapon and checked to make sure Mike wasn't hurt. She told him to call 911 and then hide in the back office until police arrived. Mike nodded numbly and stumbled toward the office, still processing what he had witnessed. That left only the leader, who was the most dangerous of the three. Unlike his nervous partners, this man seemed more controlled and experienced. Sarah could hear him moving through the store, searching for his missing team members and calling out threats. Sarah knew that the leader would soon discover his unconscious partners and realize he was facing a serious threat. She needed to end this confrontation before he could escape or hurt anyone else. The element of surprise was her biggest advantage, but it wouldn't last much longer. She made her way toward the front of the store, moving carefully to avoid detection. The leader was near the customer service counter, and Sarah could see that he had found the silent alarm button. He was smart enough to realize that police were probably already on their way. The criminal began moving toward the exit, clearly planning to abandon his failed robbery and escape. Sarah couldn't let that happen. A desperate armed criminal loose in the neighborhood would be a threat to everyone in the area. She had to stop him here and now. Sarah took position behind a display of soft drinks near the main aisle. The leader would have to pass this spot to reach the exit, and she would only get one chance to take him down. Unlike the other two criminals, this man was alert and dangerous. Any mistake could be fatal. She could hear sirens in the distance, which meant the police were responding to the silent alarm. But they were still several minutes away, and a lot could happen in that time. The leader heard the sirens too, and his movements became more urgent as he headed for the door. As he passed her hiding spot, Sarah struck. But this criminal was different from the others. He had been expecting trouble and spun around quickly, bringing his gun up toward her. Sarah found herself face to face with a loaded weapon, held by someone who clearly knew how to use it. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The leader's eyes widened as he realized that the person who had been hunting his team wasn't a security guard or off-duty cop, but a woman in a grocery store uniform. His surprise lasted only a split second, but that was enough time for Sarah to move. Years of combat training and life-or-death situations had honed Sarah's reflexes to a razor's edge. She deflected the gun barrel away from her body while simultaneously striking the criminal's wrist, causing him to lose his grip on the weapon. The gun skittered across the floor out of reach of both combatants. Now it was a fair fight, and Sarah's military training gave her every advantage she needed. The leader was bigger and stronger than Sarah, but size meant nothing when facing someone with her level of training. As he lunged toward her, Sarah used his momentum against him, grabbing his arm and using a judo throw to send him crashing into a display of potato chips. Bags exploded everywhere as he hit the metal shelving hard. He recovered quickly, proving that he had some fighting experience of his own. The man came at Sarah again, this time with more caution and better technique. He threw a series of punches that showed he knew how to fight, but Sarah had spent years training with some of the most elite fighters in the world. She blocked his attacks easily, her muscle memory taking over completely. In her mind, she was back in the combat training facilities where she had learned to fight for her life. Every movement was precise and purposeful, designed to end the confrontation as quickly as possible. The criminal tried to grab Sarah in a bear hug, hoping to use his size advantage to overpower her. Instead, Sarah dropped low and swept his leg, sending him tumbling to the ground. Before he could get up, she applied an arm lock that caused him to cry out in pain and surrender. Within seconds, the most dangerous of the three criminals was neutralized. Sarah quickly secured him with zip ties from the store's office supplies ensuring he wouldn't be able to escape or cause any more trouble. The entire confrontation had lasted less than 2 minutes. As the sirens grew louder, Sarah took a moment to assess the situation. All 3 criminals were unconscious or secured, all the hostages were safe, and no one had been seriously injured. Her mission was complete, just like countless others she had accomplished during her military career. But as the adrenaline began to fade, Sarah realized that her life was about to change dramatically. She could already hear police cars pulling into the parking lot, and soon she would have to explain how a part-time grocery store employee had single-handedly defeated 3 armed criminals. The first police officers through the door were shocked by what they found. 2 unconscious criminals, a third secured with zip ties, and a calm woman in a store uniform, standing among the wreckage of what had clearly been an intense fight. It wasn't exactly what they had expected when responding to a silent alarm. Officer Janet Chen was the first to approach Sarah. She had been with the Denver Police Department for 8 years and had seen plenty of robbery scenes, but nothing quite like this. The woman standing before her looked completely ordinary, except for the fact that she had apparently just defeated 3 armed criminals without any weapons of her own. Sarah calmly explained what had happened, though she kept the details about her military background brief. She told the officers that the 3 men had entered the store and threatened the employees and customers with guns. When she saw an opportunity to help, she had acted to protect innocent people. Officer Chen noticed immediately that Sarah's account was precise and detailed, like someone who was trained to observe and remember important facts. Most civilians in traumatic situations had trouble recalling specific details, but Sarah could describe exactly where each criminal had been positioned and what they had done. As more officers arrived, they began securing the scene and checking on the other people in the store. Mike emerged from the back office, still shaken but eager to tell everyone how Sarah had saved his life. The couple from the produce section also praised Sarah's actions, describing how she had rescued them from a terrifying situation. Detective Maria Rodriguez was called in to handle the investigation. She was a veteran investigator who had worked hundreds of robbery cases, and she immediately noticed that this scene was different from anything she had encountered before. The level of precision and skill required to defeat 3 armed criminals suggested that Sarah had some kind of special training. When Detective Rodriguez interviewed Sarah, she asked direct questions about her background. Sarah knew she couldn't hide her military service any longer, so she explained that she was a former Navy SEAL who had recently left the service. The detective's eyebrows raised significantly at this revelation. Everything suddenly made sense to Detective Rodriguez. The tactical precision, the ability to remain calm under pressure, and the hand-to-hand combat skills all pointed to elite military training. Sarah wasn't just a lucky grocery store employee. She was a highly trained special operations veteran who had been in the right place at the right time. The news media arrived shortly after the police had secured the scene. Local television stations had monitored the police radio traffic and sent reporters to cover what they initially thought was a routine robbery. Instead, they found a story that was much more compelling than anything they had expected. Sarah tried to avoid the reporters, but word of her military background had already spread among the police officers. Soon the journalist learned that the woman who had stopped the robbery was a decorated Navy SEAL veteran. The story took on a life of its own as news of the incident spread across social media and national news networks. Within hours, Sarah's quiet attempt at civilian life was over. Her photo was on television screens across the country, and her story was being shared millions of times online. The woman who had just wanted to stock shelves and heal from her combat experiences was suddenly a national hero. Mike was interviewed by every news station in Denver, and he couldn't stop praising Sarah's courage and skill. He told reporters that he had always known there was something special about her, though he had never imagined she was a former Navy SEAL. He offered her a promotion and a raise, but Sarah wasn't sure she wanted to stay in the spotlight. The 3 criminals were taken to the hospital for treatment and then to jail to face charges. As they learned more about who had defeated them, they realized how completely outmatched they had been. They had planned to rob a simple grocery store, and instead had encountered one of the most elite warriors in the American military. Detective Rodriguez completed her investigation quickly, since the evidence was overwhelming and the criminal's guilt was obvious. She recommended that no charges be filed against Sarah, since she had clearly acted in self-defense and in defense of others. The district attorney agreed, stating that Sarah's actions were completely justified and heroic. As Sarah sat in the police station answering the last of the detective's questions, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few hours. She had come to work expecting another quiet evening of stocking shelves, but instead had found herself back in combat mode, protecting innocent people from dangerous criminals. For the first time since leaving the military, Sarah felt a sense of purpose and accomplishment that reminded her why she had become a Navy SEAL in the first place. She had used her skills to make a real difference in people's lives, and that feeling was something she had missed more than she realized. The next morning, Sarah woke up to find news vans parked outside her apartment building. Her phone had been ringing constantly with calls from reporters, book publishers, and movie producers who all wanted to tell her story. The quiet life she had been trying to build as a civilian had disappeared overnight. Sarah's neighbors, who had barely known her before, were suddenly fascinated by the Navy SEAL living in their building. Mrs. Peterson from apartment 3B knocked on her door with homemade cookies and endless questions about military life. The building's security guard asked for her autograph and wanted to hear every detail about the store incident. The story had gone viral on social media, with millions of people sharing videos and articles about the former Navy SEAL, who had stopped a robbery while stocking shelves. Comments ranged from amazement and admiration to conspiracy theories and criticism. Some people questioned whether the story was real, while others called Sarah a hero who represented the best of American values. Sarah found the attention overwhelming and uncomfortable. During her military career, successful missions were usually classified and never discussed publicly. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and she didn't particularly enjoy it. All she had wanted was to help innocent people, not become a celebrity. Mike called her early that morning to check on her and to let her know that the Quick Mart corporate office was thrilled with the positive publicity. The company's stock price had actually gone up after the story broke, and they wanted to feature Sarah in a national advertising campaign. They offered her a significant bonus and a management position, but Sarah wasn't sure if she wanted to stay. The FBI also contacted Sarah that day. Agent David Kim explained that the three criminals were part of a larger robbery ring that had been hitting small businesses across the state. Sarah's actions had not only prevented this particular crime, but had also helped break up an organized criminal operation. The information found on the criminals' phones led to several other arrests. Agent Kim was also a military veteran, having served in the Army before joining the FBI. He understood the challenges that Sarah was facing as she transitioned to civilian life. He offered her a position with the Bureau, suggesting that her unique skills and experience would be valuable in federal law enforcement. Sarah was intrigued by the FBI offer, but she wasn't ready to make any major decisions. She asked Agent Kim for time to think about it, explaining that she was still figuring out what she wanted to do with her life after the military. He understood and gave her his card, telling her the offer would remain open. As the day progressed, Sarah received a call that surprised her more than any of the others. Admiral Rebecca Thompson, her former commanding officer, was on the line. The Admiral had seen the news coverage and wanted to congratulate Sarah on her actions at the store. Admiral Thompson explained that the Navy was getting positive publicity for the first time in months, thanks to Sarah's heroic actions. She mentioned that several young women had already contacted Navy recruiters, saying they wanted to become SEALs like Sarah. The Admiral asked if Sarah would consider returning to active duty or working as a civilian contractor for special operations training. The conversation with Admiral Thompson brought back memories of Sarah's military career and the sense of purpose she had felt as a SEAL. She remembered the pride of serving something bigger than herself and the satisfaction of using her skills to protect others. But she also remembered the trauma and loss that had led to her decision to leave the service. That evening, Sarah's therapist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, called to check on her. Dr. Walsh was concerned about how the sudden fame and attention might affect Sarah's recovery from her combat-related stress. They had been working together for months to help Sarah adjust to civilian life and process her military experiences. Dr. Walsh reminded Sarah that healing wasn't a linear process and that major life changes could trigger unexpected emotional responses. She suggested that Sarah take some time away from the media attention and focus on her own well-being before making any decisions about her future. Sarah appreciated Dr. Walsh's concern, but she also realized something important during their conversation. For the first time since leaving the military, she felt truly alive and engaged. The adrenaline and sense of purpose she had experienced during the store incident reminded her of who she really was, underneath all the civilian clothes and quiet routines. Over the next few days, Sarah received dozens of job offers from security companies, police departments, and private military contractors. Everyone wanted to hire the Navy SEAL who had become a national hero. The offers were flattering and financially tempting, but Sarah knew that money wasn't her primary motivation. She also heard from other military veterans who had seen her story and wanted to share their own experiences. Many of them were struggling with the same issues Sarah faced, finding purpose and meaning in civilian life after years of military service. They thanked her for showing that veterans could still make a difference in their communities. A group of female veterans reached out to Sarah with a particularly interesting proposal. They wanted her to help them start a nonprofit organization that would provide self-defense training and safety education to women and children. The organization would be staffed by military veterans who were looking for meaningful work in civilian life. Sarah was immediately drawn to this idea. It would allow her to use her skills to help people, while also providing opportunities for other veterans who were struggling with the transition to civilian life. The work would be challenging and meaningful, without requiring her to return to military service or law enforcement. As she considered her options, Sarah realized that the store incident had been a turning point in her life. It had reminded her that her military training and experience were valuable assets that could be used to help others. Even outside of official military or law enforcement roles, Sarah decided to meet with the group of female veterans to discuss their nonprofit proposal in detail. She was excited about the possibility of creating something new and positive from her military experience, rather than just trying to forget about it or move on from it entirely. The meeting took place at a small coffee shop in downtown Denver, away from the media attention that still followed Sarah wherever she went. The 5 women who had contacted her were all military veterans from different branches of service, and they had all struggled with finding their place in civilian society. As they talked about their vision for the organization, Sarah felt a sense of excitement and purpose that she hadn't experienced since leaving the military. This could be her chance to build something meaningful, while helping other people at the same time. 6 months after the store incident, Sarah stood in front of the newly opened Guardian Angels Training Center, watching as their first class of students practiced basic self-defense techniques. The nonprofit organization she had helped create with her fellow female veterans was already making a real difference in the community. The training center occupied a renovated warehouse in downtown Denver, with modern equipment and dedicated spaces for different types of instruction. They offered classes ranging from basic personal safety awareness to advanced self-defense techniques, all taught by military veterans who understood the importance of being prepared for dangerous situations. Sarah's role as the organization's director allowed her to use her military leadership experience while staying connected to her community. She had found the perfect balance between her past as a Navy SEAL and her future as a civilian. The work was challenging and meaningful, and every day brought new opportunities to help people. The center's reputation had grown quickly, thanks in part to the publicity from Sarah's store heroics. Women from across the city enrolled in classes, bringing their daughters, sisters, and friends. Local police departments referred victims of domestic violence to the center for training and emotional support. One of Sarah's favorite success stories was Maria Gonzalez, a single mother who had enrolled in classes after her ex-boyfriend had threatened her. Maria had been terrified and helpless when she first arrived, but 6 months of training had transformed her into a confident woman who knew how to protect herself and her children. The other veterans who worked at the center had also found new purpose in their civilian lives. Jessica, a former Marine who had struggled with depression after leaving the service, now taught children's safety classes and had become one of the most popular instructors. David, an Army veteran who had lost his leg in combat, specialized in adaptive self-defense techniques for people with disabilities. The center also provided counseling and support services for military veterans who were dealing with the challenges of civilian life. Sarah had learned from her own experience that the transition from military to civilian life could be incredibly difficult, and she wanted to help other veterans navigate that journey more successfully. Mike Henderson, Sarah's former boss at Quick Mart, had become one of the center's biggest supporters. He regularly donated supplies and had convinced several other local business owners to sponsor classes for low-income families. He often told people that hiring Sarah was the best decision he had ever made, even though she had only worked for him for a few weeks. The 3 criminals who had attempted to rob the store were now serving prison sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. During their trials, they had expressed remorse for their actions and admitted that they had never expected to encounter someone with Sarah's level of training. Their failed robbery had become a cautionary tale about underestimating people based on their appearance. Detective Rodriguez had kept in touch with Sarah and occasionally referred crime victims to the training center. She was amazed by the positive impact the organization was having on the community and often said that Sarah's heroic actions had created something much more valuable than just stopping one robbery. Agent Kim from the FBI had also become a friend and supporter of the center. He occasionally guest lectured about personal safety and crime prevention, and he had helped Sarah navigate the legal requirements for establishing the nonprofit organization. His offer for Sarah to join the FBI remained open, but she was happy with the path she had chosen. Sarah's relationship with Dr. Walsh, her therapist, had evolved as well. The successful launch of the training center had been therapeutic for Sarah, giving her a positive outlet for her military experience and helping her process her combat trauma in a healthy way. Dr. Walsh now referred other veteran clients to the center for both training and peer support. The media attention around Sarah had eventually died down, which she was grateful for. She preferred to focus on her work, rather than being a public figure, though she occasionally agreed to interviews that promoted the training center or veteran causes. She had learned to use her brief fame to benefit others rather than just enduring it. Admiral Thompson had visited the center during a trip to Denver and was impressed by what Sarah and her team had accomplished. The Admiral had written a letter of recommendation that helped the center secure a major grant from the Department of Veterans Affairs, ensuring its financial stability for years to come. On quiet evenings, Sarah sometimes thought about how dramatically her life had changed since that night at Quick Mart. The scared lost veteran who had been stocking shelves and struggling to find her place in the world had become a confident leader who was making a real difference in people's lives. She had learned that leaving the military didn't mean leaving behind everything she had gained from her service. Her training, experience, and dedication to protecting others were still valuable assets that could be used in civilian life. She just needed to find the right way to channel them. The training center had also helped Sarah understand that she wasn't alone in her struggles. Many veterans faced similar challenges when transitioning to civilian life, and by working together, they could create opportunities and support systems that benefited everyone. As Sarah locked up the training center one evening and headed home to her apartment, she felt a sense of satisfaction and peace that had been missing from her life for months. She had found her new mission, and it was just as important and meaningful as anything she had done in the military. The woman who had once been afraid that her best days were behind her now looked forward to the future with excitement and purpose. Sarah Martinez, former Navy SEAL and current civilian hero, had discovered that the end of one chapter in her life was really just the beginning of another. Her service to others continued, just in a different uniform and a different setting, but with the same dedication and courage that had always defined her character. The Guardian Angels Training Center stood as proof that heroes could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not on foreign battlefields, but in grocery store aisles and community training centers where ordinary people learned to protect themselves and each other.